Hi, welcome back to my channel. So today I just wanted to do a tutorial on how you can draw hair with colored pencils. And hair is a really challenging thing to learn how to draw, so I wanted to share some important tips on how you can learn to draw hair. So in my example, I'm drawing orange-brown hair, but these tips are going to apply for all hair colors, so any hair color that you're drawing. I've listed all the polychromos that I used in this drawing, so generally you want to use 5 colors at the very least in your hair drawing. So a color for the underlayer, a light, mid, and dark tone, and then something like black or sepia for your darkest areas. I'm using some extra colors since I'm doing orange-brown hair, so I wanted to pick both orange and brown tones. Before I actually talk about step-by-step, I just wanted to mention some important things you need to focus on when drawing hair. First of all, you have to think of hair as sections like clumps or locks with their own shapes and not individual strands of hair. Also, you need to pay attention to the direction that the hair is going in, because if you draw hair in the wrong direction, it's not going to look realistic. You also need to preserve your highlights, define your shadows, and then use your mid-tone colors to blend between highlights and shadows. And actually adding individual details like strands of hair comes last after you've done all of this. Okay, so you can see at this stage, everything is still very grainy, even though I've built up a lot of colors. And don't worry too much about graininess as you're building up your colors, because you do want to use a light hand and avoid pressing hard, except for your darkest shadowed areas. When you've built up enough color, you can go in with your underlayer color. So I used ivory from the Polychromos set, which is like an off-white. You can go in with that and blend over the top of all the colors, and that way you get rid of the graininess of the paper. But you don't want to blend it too hard, because you still want to be able to go back and add more color on top after. But you can see that once I did that, all the graininess is gone. But you don't want to do that too early on, because you want to make sure you've built up enough color so that there's enough pigment on the paper, and when you do go in to blend, it's going to look smooth. So I'm going to be finished with this section, and I'm moving on to this other section of hair that's a little bit more difficult to draw, because there's all these different locks of hair going in different directions. So I'm starting off by using my mid brown tone color to block in the shadows, and then I'm using sepia to get the darkest shadows in as well. So sometimes when you block in your shadows first, it helps you define the shapes, and you can see the different directions that the hair is going in, so you don't kind of lose that. Then you can go in with your underlayer color and some of your lighter tones and start to build up those midtones while still preserving your highlights. So you don't want to go over your highlights too much, but you also don't want your highlights to be too white, because that wouldn't look realistic either. They just have to be light in comparison to your midtones and your darker shadowed areas. And so you can see that I'm smoothing out the colors again by using the underlayer, so I've smoothed out the graininess, and I'm continuing to add more color on top and build up some of those shadows. You do have to be patient, because building up all the shadows and everything is going to take a while, and there's some stages where the drawing isn't going to look that good, but you have to keep going and trust that you can continue adding more layers and smoothing it out until it looks how you want it to. So with hair, you generally just keep working on it until you're satisfied with your result. You can also see I'm using a little stick eraser to add some details sometimes. So then I'm going in and working on this little lock of hair that's hanging over the girl's face in this drawing, and this one doesn't have too many dark shadows, so I'm going to keep the tones mostly orange and a little bit of brown for the shadowed areas. But generally when you draw a lock of hair that's kind of hanging like this, you just want to make sure that you taper off the hair at the bottom so that it looks realistic, and you don't want to press too hard, so you don't want to rush the little areas like this. Even though it's not as big as the previous sections we worked in, you still want to make sure that all the little areas of hair look good. So you want to take equal amounts of time into making everything look good. You can also see I'm going in and adding some more details to different areas as I look at my reference photo, so pay attention to your reference photo and see if there's any details you need to add. And also you do want to make sure you transition between the hair and the scalp as well, so you don't want it to just start and look too harsh. And I've moved on to a different area, and this is hair that is going in like a circular direction because it's moving around since her hair is tied up. So again, pay attention to the direction that the hair is going in and doing the same method of blocking in the shadows. And there's a lot of brown tones rather than orange-red tones in this section, so I'm mostly using my brown tones to start. It's also a very dark area, so I go in right away and start adding some of the darkest shadows, but I'm still preserving some of the lighter areas. So even with your darkest shadows, unless it's just pure dark shadow in an area where there's nothing that you can see, but usually there's going to still be a little bit of lighter sections in even your darkest shadowed areas. I'm still going in and adding a few red and orange tones, even in this little section of hair. And I'm also using my Tombow Mono Zero stick eraser to pull out some highlights, which I'm going to use later as well. So this really helps you get some sharp details. So if you do want to invest in that, I would recommend it. You can also just cut off the edge of a sharp, like, white eraser and use that for the time being if you don't have a stick eraser with you. Another important thing to remember is don't rush towards the end of the drawing. You want to make sure you give equal attention to each section of hair. So if anything, take a break and come back to it, because if you start to rush through it, you'll definitely notice one area looking better or worse than another area. So I'm almost done here, and I'm just working on these last areas of hair at the very top of her head. And some of them you can't see where they taper off, and others you can kind of see, and there are some details and flyaway hairs, so pay attention to that as well. Also, don't stress too much about your hair not looking exactly like your reference photo, because hair moves freely all the time, so it doesn't have to be exact, and everything doesn't have to be in perfect placement like, let's say, the features on a face would be. With hair, it's more fluid and constantly moving, so as long as it looks realistic, that's what matters. Rather than copying every little detail that you can see in your reference photo. And after you finish all of this, you can go in and add flyaway hairs with your pencil, and also I used my stick eraser to create some flyaway hairs on top of the hair, as you can see. And you can even go in with your pencil and add a few details like individual strands within the clumps of hair, and that really makes it all come together in the end. And I just really quickly want to sum it up. So when drawing hair, you should use at least 5 colors. You should pay attention to clumps and locks rather than individual strands. Try to focus on the direction the hair is going. Don't color in random directions. And also focus on shadows, highlights, and blending them together with your mid-tone. So you're very much focusing on hair as a shape. So that's pretty much it for this video. I know that was kind of a lot, but drawing hair is very time consuming, and there's a lot of different things to remember when you're coloring in hair. So hopefully some of my tips helped you guys out. So please like this video if you enjoyed it, or it would be great if you leave a comment with your feedback or your input, or even just what you thought of this hair drawing that I did. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.